After some rather harrowing events, it often feels right to get a nice change of pace, and what better way to do that than to try a game I've never played? This is Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night. As far as I'm aware, it's a love letter to a genre, and more specifically a franchise, that I never really got into. But with humans being fused with crystals extracted from fiends, and later sacrificed in an attempt to deal with the world-ending threat that is the impending demon hordes, well, that sounds just campy enough to be awesome. The game centers around one Miriam, a shardbinder that mysteriously entered an exactly 10-year-long coma right before the culling of her kind as I chased down a close friend of hers, also a shardbinder, who somehow survived the attempt to, remove his living privileges. Wait, his name is Gebel?
Gebel.
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 We're saying the same thing. So if Gebel is responsible for summoning, well, there are a few safety blankets for me as comfortable as summons, so summon I will. Summon I must. Or, I guess for the most literal interpretations, I guess we're already at the end of the run. Tutorials and all that. With nothing else to be done about it, and me really wanting to play the game, I summoned my foot in attack position. With it dead, I was able to collect a shard that gave me my first ability, and an example of how the game works as a whole. While the game fits into a lot of different genres, it has a lot of what I think are fun little bits of RPG-ness tied into its core. Your abilities will almost all come from enemies, killing them to harvest what they can do. The drop rates are often somewhere around 2 to 4%, so there's a ton of farming. If that's not your thing, then this game would likely be hell, but if I'm being honest, I had the opposite issue. I had to force myself to finish the game rather than continue to just farm out more stuff, because there's a lot of paths of progression, secrets to find, I really like this game. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I summoned a ball of water to open a living barrel, scooped out its innards, and shot them at a cannon to open the way forward. There are some contextual abilities that you have to use to proceed, and I'm not counting those against myself here or anywhere else. You can chalk that up as a failure, but if you've made it past the foot, the fireball, and the fact that there are a minimum of 2 mandatory combat-based water balls or some other thing, then by Jove, I have a journey for you. 2, you may ask? Well, there's an enemy on the ship here with me that has a low chance to drop a shard. I didn't get it on my first try, but theoretically could have. This shard is incredibly important because it will give me my first actual summon and mark the end of technicalities or shenanigans barring one. Do you see that bar on the top left? You see that teeny tiny little bar that's currently filling at a rate of 1 per second. The one that empties at a rate of 30 mana per cast, well, that is as good as it's going to be for a really long while. The drop rate of the shard that I want is 2%. On average, I need to kill the thing 50 times, but that's not where it ends, because to get higher grades of shards, you need to get more of them. Or an average of about 450 kills, which each takes a minimum of 30 seconds to regenerate the needed mana to kill. Any miss is likely at least doubling that because my ghost has terrible and slow tracking. So these lanterns provide flowers that give you mana back when kicked. This may surprise you, but I'm a human being and want to have fun too. If you don't absolutely detest me as a person, then I beg of you, please just look past the flower kicking. It just served to speed up the farming that I was going to do one way or another. This just meant that I got to have fun doing it because this was only the beginning. I did eventually find the lost gerbil, who seems really intent on a righteous vengeance sort of deal that Miriam just wasn't vibing with. There was something about him, though, that made her think that he wasn't purely evil in spite of, things. Also, the shard's statistically corrupting pretty much everyone who ever became what we are. So this game definitely has some design choices that harken back to an earlier period of artistic directions, and in the case of the first boss, I really don't think that I can show it, so suffice to say that it was really easy after the rather excessive farming in the first area. You could say that it got ghosted. Into the next area, though, after beaching our boat, I located a rat. Not just any rat, though, but a giant one. And you may be thinking, why care about something so seemingly insignificant? Well, ye of little faith, this game treats summons with some respect. It makes them relatively plentiful, and this rat will be another method by which I carry on. After some farming. I desummoned a demon via my foot because cutscene Miriam didn't get the memo, all to save the game's merchant and person of the church. Meeting back up with my assistant, I've now got my alchemist by my side as well. These two cost me so many resources, so many satisfying numbers that all went up. I've been brought here, though, to handle exactly this thing that I was gonna handle anyway. Nice when goals just align like that. Anyway, if you're done with almost dying, I've got more rat farming to do. Huh. So they leave a little bit to be desired at the moment. But they'll grow. Oh, they'll grow. Most shards get their rank upgrades primarily from resources dropped rarely by the same enemy that drops the shard. Rank upgrades are not to be confused with grade upgrades. Did I mention that this game has some farming to be done? And again, this is not a complaint, but it did mean that my ghosts got a pretty nifty upgrade. I didn't really have the mana to throw around ghosts at the beginning, but even some early enemies would drop things like certain foods that you can't get easily elsewhere, meaning there were strong incentives to stock up pretty much everywhere you go. It was probably over half the game later that I realized that I needed the lemons that the bird people drop here. Now, I'm not one for side paths, I get overwhelmed pretty easily in terms of exploration, but the map made getting around relatively manageable. Marking things easily, things at least mostly being noted well. I kept finding myself going off in side directions, and I think my final map completion was somewhere around 99%. Into the game's main setting, though, is a giant castle. Having only played Curse of Darkness, and to a certain degree, the first Devil May Cry, this took me back to a style of games that, again, I didn't really play at the time they were relevant. While watching my ghosts tear through anything that moved, I got such a wonderful taste of nostalgia through a love letter to the genre. Is this how people see Hollow Knight? We really need to get around to that. Like, who put this pool of blood here? Why is it here? How is it here? You're telling me it isn't evaporating, or possibly more concerningly, it's being replenished? This is stupid, and I adore it. I pretty quickly found the obviously evil guy, who's not just evil but mean at any given turn. Not just to me, but to his student that's helping me. And also, how did you get past all of the monsters that I either didn't kill or just respawned as soon as I left the room? I'm pretty sure Swift Breeze would pose a risk to the health and safety of my assistant. Anyway, back to ghosts. They last a limited time, love to bounce around, and rarely go where I want, but it's so satisfying to see them work. Along my travels, I found Coachman, who wants me to move a really heavy block so he can ride over a gap that... I'm not saying there are more convenient paths across, but this seems like an odd choice, especially considering this game's weird 2.5D thing that it has going on. I guess implying the block is ludicrously wide in other directions. Couldn't just step to the right? Back just a little bit, this room would contain not one, but two more summons. One that I never used, and one that I rarely used, but still. That moon sure looks weird. I did manage to find an edgelord who's really aggressive toward any fiend adjacent folk. In the black and white world of this one, despite both being on the same side, he's at least partially on board with killing me. He's holding back, though, for reasons. The game directly states that he's actually way more powerful. No, really, guys, he's got the power to block anything with magic, and also a sword that can cut through anything because he's really cool, and he has depth perception despite having one usable eye, but actually his missing eye makes him see even better because he's magic. He's missing an arm, but he replaced it with a magic arm because he's just that neato, and he can fly and teleport, and I really wish I was exaggerating, but I'm sure his maternal figure also says that he's the most handsome boy in school. I swear this guy could cure cancer, but chooses not to because he's worried he'd cut patients in the wrong places with all of that edge. So basically, I'd like to reiterate that this game is great. Dominique does show up to rein him in to middling success. Zangetsu is voiced by David Hayter, so hearing the voice of Snake being talked to almost like a child is an experience.
I was bored with her anyway.
Do your job, Zangetsu. You need to put a stop to Alfred.
And when you're done, don't forget to clean your room. You can drop in to get hints as to where to go, and some of them paint a significantly funnier image than others. It being a metroidvania, though, I need to go to get a double jump. Up above me, you can hear a killer barber running around, and I love the sound design. Also the goofy name of some enemies. Some things are so dumb that I genuinely don't know what to say, so I'll just say this. Thank you. Thank you for writing this. It's so campy, and I'm so glad that it's here. The dude is cursed to cut 666 different good-looking hairstyles, and if the cuts are bad, then his cursed scissors will kill his client. That's their justification for some mild character customization, and it's just so beautiful. Next, though, would come an important period of farming for a passive shard that increases my intelligence. Sometimes I often find myself lacking, but in this case, it directly increases the damage of my shard abilities. I'm fairly sure. Gonna level with you, the numbers didn't seem huge, but it's not like I really needed an excuse to farm out demons in this place, or any. This room was also responsible for finding me my first familiar. Familiar shards work like normal summons, except that they don't at all. Well, okay, a little. They don't cost any mana, they're not very aggressive, but they're always with me. Unless the game bugs out and they don't spawn properly, which happens pretty often. In addition, they can level up through combat XP, also gaining grades and ranks. This one is a sentient sword. It went with me to deal with the Stained Glass Master hand, and in terms of most bosses, rats pretty quickly became my go-to. Big enemies that don't move a ton and just stand on the constant damage ticks in addition to the ton of little damaging rats that explode out of the big one. No, I'm not going to consider why that is, don't ask, it's just a really good source of demon killing. For my efforts, I'm rewarded with a hand of my own. It'll let me move some stuff around the castle to better explore. It is arguably a summoned hand, but I won't be using it in combat. Feels like I have too much control over it. After clearing the way, yeah, again, I've got nothing. This game is magical. Most ask you to suspend your disbelief. This one demands that you expel it. Next was farming a small fairy that can be a familiar. It's fast and easy to do. Her being right next to the loading screen went a long way. The game did glitch out for a bit, resulting in me having 2 familiars. I don't think I'm supposed to be able to do that, and I'm not sure what caused it, but free summons. In my efforts to explore as much as possible, I actively avoided going toward where I believed progress to lay. This led to me falling progressively further into places that I'm fairly sure double jump was meant to guide me. And frankly, the deeper I got, the more I regretted not picking it up before coming here, and I'll be honest, the moral support of my companions just wasn't moraling or supporting hard enough, and I started longing for a path out of here. For a fair bit of time though, any and all attempts to push through to the other side just landed me further in. Go figure. I would eventually though find this room, and not only is it almost the way out, but these floating head things are an incredible asset to me. They may not look it now, but they will. Oh, they will. They're a bit cumbersome to kill, especially with the roly dudes here, who were also a summon, but I never used them, so I really don't care. I was here to see heads roll. Not you! Once upgraded, they would take the place of my other familiar. A swarm of 5 may not be a large swarm, and their damage may not be large either, but they come together to forge a beautiful piece of my team. Bridge of Evil? No, I'm looking for the bridge of getting to my goddamn destination. Who the hell has the time to pass through evil? It's a dreadful visit this time of year anyway. Conversely, near the giant towers that are here for the reason that they look cool and are fun to traverse, you'll see the wrong number of summons out and 2.5D whatnot coming into play. Things do genuinely exist in 3-dimensional spaces, so my flying units will just kinda not hit things correctly all the time. The hitboxes aren't great at the best of times, and they're worse here because I have no genuine control of my depth relative to the camera. It's janky. Not unforgivable, but janky. Clock tower level. You're goddamn right I want a clock tower level, even if those gears clearly wouldn't work due to their shape and spacing. You can get away with gears of different shapes and sizes, but not with that profile unless you're looking at a rack. But those aren't racks, they're gears, and you gotta have some respect for engineering. It's tough work and gears like to bind. No amount of summoning Cthulhu will distract me from those flat gear teeth. Also, fun fact, one of the alternate names for the creature is Thuthu. I just thought you should know. Gebel, I found you! That wasn't me. Obviously evil guy versus also obviously evil guy. One dude has an ancient and powerful tome with the power to summon demons and angels alike, and the other wants it. There's only one way this can be settled. Who can more dramatically resolve nothing and teleport away? Good showing, good showing. What about you? I don't know, seemed a little understated. What did the judges think? Judges? I delved deeper into the location with increasingly cool visuals, building on itself as the higher locations get progressively fanciful, mirroring the perceived challenge and royal status of those that lie at the top. Within the area, though, I found Odie. Doesn't quite look like he'd be hanging out with Garfield, but he still seems cool. Does that reference mean I'm getting old? When was the last time that was even relevant? Oh no. Well, in any case, while he can't help me ship things to Abu Dhabi, he can give me books that give some buffs of questionable quality, and also help with my progression. See, this vampire is somehow managed to get photo ID, and is willing to give me his credentials to slip past the requirements for a train. I just need to find a way to take my own picture first. That will need to wait though, because first I need to steal the ability to double jump via ripping it out of this demon right here. And when you put it like that, it certainly feels at least a touch less morally justifiable. I did kind of need to use my ghosts with how jumpy the boss is. They may not keep pace well, but they do stand a chance to hit it that my rats just don't. That being said, the boss overall makes terrible use of the environment and does realistically very little to get away from my barrage of friends. Doing my best to find things hidden in cracks and crevices around the map, I was left wanting for the platforming to be a bit tighter. At least there's no fall damage. And while the jank didn't stop me from having fun, I do have to ask, how and why did that happen? You confuse me, game. You confuse me mercilessly. Well. Despite some relatively severe loading issues that this boss and arena caused, it was time to fight arguably one of the coolest visual designs in the game. It's like the devs saw the gaping dragon and said, hold on, I can make it better and worse. And while my fight with it was mostly just running away, turning and tanking damage to throw rats at it, that doesn't change just how neat it was. I don't want to linger on it for too long though, because the screen shake is pretty atrocious. All in all, I enjoyed it, but I don't think everyone can or will. After the fight, there's something just so atmospheric about the downward climb. So peaceful as a sort of contrast to the hectic nature of what came before. It did get me the supplies that I needed rather conveniently for the camera that Dominique had waiting. And for the record, I'm wearing this mask for stat reasons. I am all too aware that it clashes with my dress. You don't need to point out the crimes of fashion that I'm committing here. After stopping to get some Is it fake ID? I think it might be fake, at least partially. I'm not sure. If they are real, why is the librarian handling it all the way across the castle? Not important. Zangetsu and I threw ourselves onto the track for some reason to apparently catch up to it and ride along. If we were able to make up the distance, why the hell even bother with the cars? Could just run there. I don't know what's going on anymore. I do know that there's a time detection with me accompanying him, and as dorky as he is, he's pretty effective at killing. Truth be told, I'm not sure what happens when the timer runs out, but I was a bit concerned, as timers have a way of always stressing me out. Nearing the end of the journey I'm gonna level with you. I have no idea what this thing is or what it's supposed to be, but it's pretty cool. I'll give them a hard time for some of their designs being questionable, but some of them are just cool to see. Like, what is this? Why is this? What led to a giant gun-armed demon thing on a train? I haven't a clue, but I'm happy it came to be. You can hide behind your buddy to just block all the shots, and it does suffer from the fact that it does literally nothing to meaningfully avoid the rats, but it's still neat. On the other side of train events, I located quite possibly the worst kept lab this side of the tracks, featuring irregular floors, no handrails, and probably enough general grime to constitute both OSHA and general health code violations. Just imagine the contaminations in this place. I then found Dominique, who claimed to be looking for Zangetsu, before explaining that he was told to go to a completely different location, meaning searching for him here in a lab full of demons and whatnot makes literally no sense. You can at least try to be subtle about your inevitable betrayal. I then fought a boss that prides themselves on moving crazy fast. It does this via a move that causes a lot of flashing lights that I ain't showing, but the AI is also really bad, so it wasn't really a rat fight, but it wasn't really a fight either. Just ghosts and heads. I made my way back to the bell towery section of the castle that for some reason has a ton of bells of ginormous scale. I'm no acoustics expert, but I have to imagine that these wide and mostly open rooms would allow for a significantly smaller number of bells to suffice, especially given that they're in such close proximity that it doesn't seem likely to be a coverage reason. I then fought what was basically Bayonetta if instead of hair it was blood, and instead of a witch it was a vampire. Also, she heals a lot in the mid portion of her fight based on the amount of blood in the arena. Allegedly, bladed weapons will cause more blood to be spilled, thus healing her more, which is an incredibly cool bit of attention to detail, but I also don't have any idea what kind of damage my summons are doing. So, as shameful as it was, for the first time in a little while, for me having been playing with my brain off, this was not a first try victory. The last bosses were, but this one was genuinely difficult for me to handle. I think I just got so used to not giving the bosses any respect that I fell back into the trap of not trying. And when I wanted to kinda try, well, the boss said that I had to actually try. It's a hard thing to do, rationalizing with your own brain, especially when it's a mind so prone to arguments with itself. After getting repeatedly killed, though, by moves that would stun walk like nobody's business, it was settled. I could either, put effort in, or I could continue to just enjoy this treat of a game. So I left to a completely different part of the map to explore, where I bumped into an enemy that dropped one of the most important things in the whole game. A smoothie. With food items giving permanent buffs for the first time you consume them, this one doubled my mana regen, and while survival isn't my strong suit, dealing more damage means having to live for a shorter duration to succeed. I did a lot of exploring, and I'll say again, it was only half because I felt like I should. The other half was just delighted in picking up little upgrades along the way, because numbers going up makes me happy, and good progression curves have always been fun. While avoiding the vampire, though, I would run into something far more menacing. Or, realistically, it would be if you haven't been paying attention to the pattern of big, scary boss doing absolutely nothing to avoid most of the damage that I deal, while smaller enemies being dodgier means that I'm less likely to be able to kill them quickly. It was certainly an experience getting a short cutscene showing off this guy just for him to hit the floor so fast. Maybe the dragon was malnourished, being stuck so deep into the castle? Otherwise, I'm not really sure. Journeying through some incredibly gaudy halls, I did eventually find the archdemon of the hour that would sometimes drop a particular shard that I longed for. One that would occasionally reduce the cost of abilities, and thus allow me to cast even more frequently. Given the fact that I farmed out many a shard that I didn't need, this one pretty immediately topped my priority list, even if it did need to replace my int buff. In my travels, though, I would come across a room that I never really expected to see so soon. Before long, I was met with a close friend turned seemingly unwilling foe. And if fight we must, then fight we will. Most of his attacks are really strongly telegraphed, and those that aren't are really weak. Overall, he's a shockingly easy boss. With the poor size of the arena and the upgrades to my rats, well, he just couldn't do much but keel over to the oppressive power of my summons, thus bringing an end to his reign of terror and an end to the game. A bad end, to be specific, which the game treats as a game over, so back to the drawing board and also farming. What I came back with wasn't practice, it was power. Far superior. It was numbers on numbers as I finally had the mana and the summons to keep a constant barrage of my compatriots on screen. Because I could only summon 3 rats at a time, my mana was perpetually full, and I never longed for company, for it was eagerly near and ready to do my bidding. Strong are the rats, not because they are mighty, but because they are plentiful. Ours are the whiskers that will blot out their sun. Our teeth that will chew through their wiring. Our eyes that will look back at them on a dark night in their kitchen and stare an uncomfortably long time, maintaining direct contact with their corneas. What are they gonna do? We might have rabies, and I'm not above biting and scratching. And when they should try traps, poisons, or even animal control, like a whisper, we will already be gone. For killing the Blood Lady, I can turn this mess into this not mess. Can't do that. Do they have a shard like that for crumbs? Because I'd like to invest in one. Underneath, there were more deep, and in this case, wet caves. I'm not sure that this is what people are usually talking about with seahorses. I will eventually have an upgrade that lets me just swim, but for now, I can only submerge myself by using a water spout in the opposite direction, and this feels so wrong from a design standpoint, but also so right. It's fun and unique, but also really strange. I'm not entirely sure how to feel about it overall. After stumbling, and I do mean stumbling through a lot of the place, I eventually made it to an underground desert kind of biome? This place is really weird. With me not being careful enough, I did sort of just wander into some fire and died. It's a good thing this game uses save points, and the last one was ages away because I'm bad at finding them. Coming back for definitely not petty revenge-related reasons, I found increasingly confusing locations within the sand. Along the way, I did locate an old man that lives in a relatively really small circle, and what's the practical application of this room? What happens here and how? There's just a giant hole in the ground that he hucks things over, and it's a safety hazard at the best of times and really bad for summons at the worst. Things just don't really like dealing with a 2.5-dimensional whatnot. I also didn't particularly enjoy dealing with it, and wrapping my mind around the wrapping room was rather odd. I did eventually have to start actually paying attention, and when I did, I was able to successfully beat up the old man, who then fled the scene. I took some time after to go do a little side venture. I'm not sure if it constitutes a boss fight, but it's certainly an Easter egg, and one that gives a companion, even if it is kinda useless due to the incredibly poor projectile speed. Could perform if I gave it more love? Maybe, but I also just like my swarm of heads. It's not about having bigger summons, it's about having more. Traveling into the confusing waters of the cave systems, I would make my way into a completely different lab. I'm not sure why they needed to, but my merchant was having a little chat with the dude I beat up, and again, could you at least be subtle about the whole backstabbing business? Also, what the hell is all of this? What was this lab for? This place is somehow less safe than the last one, and I'm pretty sure the only discoveries made there are all of the new bacteria they managed to cultivate. Oh well, the game wanted to pull a whole fight yourself thing, but this version of me isn't even remotely accurate. Dead on for appearance, which made things confusing in the midst of a ton of allies, but I didn't use these abilities or weapons. Frankly, this is it still defamation if it's through imitation? Because this isn't spoken or written. I don't know. Either way, I had a rough start, capped off by a relatively competent end. Something about avoiding attacks instead of just ramming them with your face just makes things go over a bit more smoothly. Of course, where else would a lab lead out into other than a lava cavern kind of deal with long-reaching and spiraling pillars that appear to have been formed intentionally, though the majority of the area else is seemingly random, odd, and overly warm. I'm personally more keen on grass and snow levels. This is a travesty. Pretty sure I passed a guy shouting about the high ground on the way in. For running through the area, dealing with bugs, dragons, and some really aggressive dogs, I located whatever this is. Not the most common of cases, but it's mobile enough to require ghosts while also being really slow. It just kind of hangs out on the ceiling, and in my time with the boss, it just didn't seem like it had any real answer to ranged attacks. Not everything does, but this one in particular was just easy. For killing it, I can invert the screen, causing me to fall up. I think I'm going to try to not show it off for fear of causing stomachs to churn. It's certainly a visual choice, is all I'll say. Finally able to get up to the ceiling, I was able to take on a series of spikes that I couldn't before. I wasn't sure how I was supposed to handle them, but I realized that I was making better progress by getting thrown back than trying to run forward. Also got a lot of use out of my healing abilities here. Before eventually and mercifully realizing that I already owned the armor that makes me immune to this. I never claimed to be all that bright. I did eventually get to, and get this, another lab. This one at least has some teleporting weirdness going on, and this is probably the only room quite this strange, and I can't help but notice a lack of safety equipment and or clearly marked exits. Got lost as hell in here, and it was a fire hazard and a half. And as cool as the effect of closing doors is, so you have silhouettes going on, you can't just try to hide ninjas that are actively trying to kill people here. No matter how good of an idea it may seem at the time, they cannot shinobi in the workplace. OSHA would have your heads. Speaking of, an optional little boss that's significantly more dangerous than most of the things I've fought, quite possibly everything that I've fought, he can summon demon lords into the fray to assist, and their area effects are relatively devastating. Staying alive was a frantic mess of jumping around mostly at random, and also occasionally eating random meals that I have for reasons I'm unsure to subdue the pain. With the Lords dead though, I was able to pretty much just hide back behind his own equipment and let my summons do the rest, which is great because I was floundering. Speaking of, Zangetsu. He's not the same, but he's also the same. The goofball kept parrying my summons though, despawning my heads, and it was obnoxious. They only respawn if you swap your loadout, which is workable, but seems like a really strange choice. Otherwise though, he's fine. Unless you listen to the story, in which case he was clearly still holding back and is basically God, but since I was able to beat him when he wasn't trying, he's giving me his magic sword. Yay. Thanks. Long story short, he's after a big spooky demon that's running from him because this is the only sword that can beat them. Kinda like Samurai Jack, but I can't take it as seriously. And so if I have it, either I should be able to kill it, or he should be able to find it. So, good plan? Give the lady you don't trust in a fight with the only thing that can stop this weirdly mythical fiend. So I went back and beat up the same guy from earlier, and by doing so, I think I damned myself and everyone else. So I tried doing it correctly and used the magic sword to attack the Red Moon. Shut up, I already got 2 different endings with summons, let me try for the good end. Also, I didn't succeed and he died. So I tried again, this time sure that I could do this really weirdly specific thing to get a different ending, and he died again. Why does he have to be so certifiably weak sauce? So I kept trying, and I swear, the hitboxes in this game just don't work a lot of the time. I'll grant you that my aim and timing suck, but they were sometimes really tight and sometimes really forgiving. Imagine not having the internet to tell you this kind of thing, and not knowing that you need to hit the color-shifting celestial body in the middle of the 0.2 seconds that the flimsy bastard is nearly dead, but still not quite. And you have to get a really tight hit on the dang thing, meaning a non-zero chance of being right and second-guessing yourself to go do something else for a while instead. Anyway, after killing my friend, because he's of course back to his old self, I would have to go after Alfred and the demon Gremory that between the two of them have the magic no-no book. To find them, you of course have to find the other location by which the moon sure does look weird, cut it in half, and that's the last I'll be seeing of the sword. The old man has already lost the book, and get this, was on my side the whole time, but made literally no attempt to just talk to any of us because he didn't think we'd listen, which even Miriam agreed with. While listening to him. She's actively hearing him out and has the benefit of the trust of multiple people present who all trust him. Also, Miriam represents half the total strength of all Shardbinders, I guess, meaning she's basically God. Things got really weird really fast. The following location, though, was full of enemies that were basically just scaled up versions of things that I've already fought. And despite that, it was genuinely pretty neat. Something about the complete shift in perspective was really cool. With things sounding wild, but overall too serious, I took a break to kill a slot machine because gambling is bad. That's it. That's your PSA. Don't do gambling. I then took a minute to beat a dude in a foot race for a shard that I unfortunately can't even use. It increases your speed like crazy, but does damage, so. Then, back on the main path, and what felt rather random, I located a gambling-themed mandatory boss? This one has a lot of area denial, pushing you around and into traps. In the middle of the fight, it'll take all of your money and gain health equal to that, or up to a cap of just under 10,000. Given my damage numbers, that sounds bad until you consider the size of the room and the sheer quantity of pigs I can unleash upon the world. It was a really recent discovery for me that there doesn't appear to be a cap on the amount of air-based pork. The world shall know of my bacon! For as much crap as I will lovingly give this game, it genuinely, and I mean this, it actually gave a reason as to why the teleporting evildoer doesn't just teleport away when their life is threatened. Why she sat there and let Zangetsu seal her inside, I have no idea, but there's a tangible reason for events occurring. Right before he got ambiguously killed. As for her, the big bad to end all big bads, I have but one word to say. Pigs! No, really, that's the note. It was honestly a bit disappointing. I expected better, but she's at least not the final boss. After a sort of long-winded but overall painfully easy spat with Dominique in her now true form, it was time to meet the demon that Gremory ended. Yeah, so I don't know if there's some kind of gimmick here that I don't know about, but you can probably guess why this was overall funny, not threatening, and just... this was a choice that happened. I'm not sure how I'd feel about this using a traditional build. It doesn't seem like it would really play to the strengths of most weapons, but I don't know how they play. It managed to turn the boss, the enemy that I'm fighting, into the room where my pigs can bounce on every surface, damaging them. Just, why? After I defeated the snake demon thing, very easily, we were able to use the book to banish the castle and demons from our world. Zangetsu's sword mysteriously disappeared, with a shadow that looks a lot like his, hinting at him being alive, and Miriam can probably be cured of her eventual descent into madness. Overall, I stand by it. This game is a cheesy mess, it's full of bugs, jank, strange choices, and it's absolutely not for everyone with the amount of grinding it has, especially at its full price point. But I really enjoyed it. If nothing else, it was a warm comfort after having some camera-based struggles recently, and it was more than welcome. But regardless, I'd like to thank my lovely channel members for your continued support. I know that not all things will be loved or welcomed equally, but it's reassuring to know that there's at least an exceptionally kind group of people willing to hear me out on some maybe off-the-beaten-path kind of adventures. No matter who you are, though, I hope you enjoyed your time here. You probably know how to use social media, and I hope that means I get to hear your thoughts now and on future outings. Until then, remember to stay safe, spread some kindness in the world, share a laugh with your summons, because life is always more fun with friends, and I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.